What happens when a woman's old identity no longer fits her life? Understanding the quiet transition between two versions of the self. Many women eventually reach a moment when the identity they have lived with for years no longer seems to fit their life in quite the same way. The change rarely arrives dramatically. There is usually no clear event that explains it. Work continues, relationships remain, routines look familiar from the outside. Yet something about the internal experience begins to feel slightly different. The role that once felt natural starts to feel more like something maintained out of habit. At first, the shift can be difficult to describe. Situations that once required no reflection begin to produce hesitation. Words take longer to arrive. Decisions that used to feel obvious suddenly feel less certain. The difference is small, but once noticed, it becomes difficult to ignore. Many women interpret this moment as dissatisfaction or fatigue. It is easy to assume that something has gone wrong. Yet the experience may have less to do with failure than with movement. Identities tend to form in response to particular conditions: a career that demands focus, a relationship that requires stability, a period of life where certain strengths are repeatedly called upon. When those conditions begin to change, the identity built around them does not disappear immediately. It simply starts to feel incomplete. A woman who spent years defining herself through professional ambition may discover that the same drive that once energized her now feels strangely exhausting. The ambition itself has not vanished. What has shifted is the relationship to it. What once felt purposeful begins to feel obligatory. Something similar can happen in quieter roles as well. A woman who has long been the reliable organizer within her family may suddenly notice that the role continues mostly because everyone expects it to. From the outside, nothing looks different. Internally, however, it no longer feels quite the same. At first, this can feel like a loss of clarity. Modern culture tends to assume that identity should remain relatively stable over time. When a familiar sense of self begins to loosen, it is tempting to assume that something essential has been lost. Yet that explanation may be too simple. The earlier identity may have fulfilled the conditions that created it. Certain traits become central because they are needed. Over time, the same patterns that once helped a woman navigate her life may begin to narrow it instead. The difficulty lies in timing. The earlier identity does not disappear at once, but nothing new has fully formed yet. For a while, a woman may still recognize herself in the person she has been, though not completely. The fit becomes looser. Something about the role feels slightly out of date, even though it still functions in everyday life. Human beings usually rely on continuity when making sense of themselves. When that continuity becomes uncertain, the instinct is often to search quickly for a new definition. Yet identity rarely reorganizes itself that neatly. In fact, the unease itself often turns out to be informative. The discomfort tends to appear precisely where something new has already begun internally, even if it is not yet visible in decisions or behavior. A long-standing ambition loses some of its urgency. A role that once felt inevitable begins to look optional. Seen from a distance, this stage may not represent the loss of an identity so much as the moment between two versions of the self. One belongs clearly to the past. The other has not yet taken shape. The space between them can feel uncertain, but it is also where many women begin to notice that identity was never as fixed as it once appeared.